Chapter 51:12 The weakness of the nine-headed snake. Everyone's hearts sank. What was going on? Next, although everyone worked together to kill a few heads of the nine-headed snake, new heads would grow almost instantly. Although the situation was still in a stalemate, everyone's spiritual power was greatly depleted. Yun Chujo narrowed her eyes and asked but face, "What is the weakness of the nine-headed snake?" She felt that since this giant snake had the bloodline of the nine neonate, perhaps its weakness was the same. But Face thought for a moment and said, "The nine neonate is very difficult to deal with. The three of us have fought it before, but we were unable to kill it. However, Tao Tai easily ate it." The reason was very simple. If you want to kill the nine neonate, you have to kill its 9 heads at the same time. Otherwise, it will keep growing new heads. Yun Chujo could not help but feel troubled when she heard this. It was not difficult to kill all 9 heads, but it was difficult to kill all 9 heads at the same time. This was not easy to do. Everyone's spiritual power was uneven. Moreover, since the nine-headed snake knew its weakness, even if it abandoned its pawn to protect Che, it would still save one of its heads. It was too difficult to kill all 9 heads at the same time. As expected, after Yun Chujo told everyone about the nine-headed snake's weakness, everyone had no way to kill 9 heads at the same time. Moreover, because their spiritual power had been depleted too much, many people were shot by the nine-headed snake's water arrows. The water arrows contained a lethal poison. Once it touched the skin, it would lose its life. The nine-headed snake's cry became more ferocious and sharp. All 9 heads revealed a greedy expression. Di Baiming, who was in his sleeve pocket, said to Yun Chujo, "Aren't you able to command 9 flying swords at the same time? Wait until the nine-headed snake's stamina is almost exhausted, then get everyone to distract the nine-headed snake's attention, and then cut off its heads. However, you must be fast, accurate, and ruthless. There's only an instant of opportunity, and only by surprise can you succeed." Yun Chujia's eyes lit up, and she said excitedly, "Prince Charming, although you have lost your memory, you are still useful." A certain being did not want to speak. Yun Chujo immediately told everyone her thoughts. Of course, she would not say it out loud directly. After all, the nine-headed strange snake could also understand human language. This fellow gestured a few times, and then said a few words in a vague manner. Mu Kalu and the others felt that Yun Chujo was most likely crazy. She had asked them to distract the attention of the nine-headed strange snake, so she had a way to kill its 9 heads. How was this possible? However, they were trying their best now. Although they felt that it was unlikely, they still began to draw the attention of the nine-headed strange snake according to what she said. Moreover, in order to make it easier for Yun Chujo to kill all 9 heads, their military force was very concentrated, so the nine-headed strange snake did not dare to scatter its spiritual power. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Time passed quickly, and everyone's spiritual power was depleted more and more severely. Some even fell into the water due to the lack of spiritual power. Mu Kalu and the others could not help but grit their teeth. Didn't that stinky girl say that she wanted to kill the nine-headed snake's head? Kill it instead. Why were they still eating melon seeds on the deck? Could it be that they were playing with them? If that was the case, they would drag her down with them even if they died. At first, the nine-headed snake had paid a little attention to Yun Chujo because she had scolded it. Later, when it saw that she was only boasting on the deck and munching on melon seeds, it completely ignored her. Yun Chujo threw the melon seeds in her hand into the water. A ruthless look flashed across her eyes. 9 flying swords rose into the air and chopped at the 9 heads of the nine-headed snake. Chapter 51:13 Flying Swords Slaying Snakes. Little slut number 1 and number 9 had been holding back for a long time. There was no other reason. Yun Chujo had a total of 77 to 49 flying swords, but at the moment, only they could show themselves. The remaining 40 were naturally unconvinced. They were anxious to prove themselves, and slaying the nine-headed strange snake was undoubtedly the best opportunity. At this time, the weapon spirits of the immortal sword and Yunchuji's goals were exactly the same. In a sense, they had achieved the unity of man and sword, and their power was several times stronger than usual. Therefore, the nine-headed snake was miserable. Its attention was not on Yunchujo at all. By the time it caught a glimpse of the cold light, it was already too late. The 9 immortal swords drew a uniform arc, and the 9 heads of the nine-headed snake were cut off. The nine-headed snake did not even have time to scream before it died. The nine-headed snake's corpse fell into the water, creating huge waves and dyeing the water red. Immediately, there was dead silence. Mukelu and the others stared at the scene in front of them with their mouths agape. Flying swords. 9 flying swords. Yunchujo could command 9 flying swords at the same time. And she could cut off the heads of the nine-headed snake at the same time. This was too terrifying. Even though she was able to succeed because they had used up a lot of the nine-headed snake's stamina and also because they had restrained her, none of them were able to do it. Qi Tianhui, Mu Zian, and the others had ugly expressions on their faces. They had always thought that Yunchujo only had a belly full of bad water and did not have any real abilities. But now, they had to admit that not only was this Yunchujo not useless, she was even more powerful than them. Even though her spiritual power level was not as high as theirs, if they were to face her 9 flying swords, there was no way they could survive. Mukelu, Qiancheng, and Zhuang Ruhai looked at each other. They could not let this Yunchujo stay. If she grew up, how could they survive? However, even though they had the intention to kill, they still hoped that Yunchujo would bring them out of the 10,000-year-old swamp. Naturally, they would not reveal it. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Hei Xinjiu was not a fool. She naturally understood that the 3 families were prepared to kill the donkey in the future. However, they were still useful. It was still uncertain who would be the donkey when the time came. While Mukelu and the others were still in a daze, this guy shamelessly put the corpse of the 9-headed snake and its head into his storage ring. Mukelu and the others were so angry that they almost died. Putting aside how much the corpse of the 9-headed snake was worth, it was mainly because it was very rare. Whether it was used to refine weapons or pills, it was a good thing. But now, this stupid girl had taken it first. Moreover, they also knew that the thing in her hands was definitely. If they didn't get it back, they could only blame their bad luck. Everyone simply fixed themselves up and continued to move forward. Yunchujo also asked them to keep the wooden boards and basins. Perhaps they could still use them in the future, so they still followed her instructions. At this time, the sky had already darkened. Everyone raised their vigilance and continued to move forward. The first half of the night was safe and sound, but in the second half of the night, Yunchujo was woken up by someone. Oh my God! It's so beautiful. Look! It's beautiful, but I'm afraid it's not a good thing. This is a 10,000-year-old swamp. Maybe it's something dangerous. That makes sense. What exactly are those things? They look like algae or something. Yunchujo yawned and went to the deck to look into the distance. She saw the surface of the water in the distance flickering with a faint blue luster. Under the night sky, it was exceptionally beautiful and strange. Chapter 51:14 Go Weiba was furious. Yunchujo thought for a moment and said, "Stop moving forward and let the Pathfinder ship go over to take a look." Now that this fellow's words were absolutely effective, Mukelu and the others immediately let the spiritual beast control the Pathfinder ship to sail towards that area of water. To everyone's surprise, the Pathfinder ship sailed past that area of water unscathed without the slightest abnormality. Yunchujo narrowed her eyes. Was there really nothing fishy going on? She didn't believe it. Mukelu and the others didn't believe it either, but what should they do now? They couldn't stop moving forward, right? Let's take a closer look, Yunchujo said. Everyone gradually approached the water. However, at this moment, the faint blue light turned into countless faint blue light spots and pounced toward them. Everyone finally saw clearly that the so-called faint blue light was actually a type of aquatic demonic insect with wings. Although the 10,000-year-old swamp forbade flying, they were still able to fly about 30 feet above the water surface and pounce towards the ship where everyone was. Yun Chujo roared, "Raise the spiritual energy barrier. Release the spiritual beast. Quick!" Everyone had experienced some battles, so their reactions were still fast. They immediately followed Yun Chujia's instructions and activated the spiritual energy shield while releasing the spiritual beasts. However, to their horror, they discovered that the dark blue demonic insects could actually corrode the spiritual beasts and spiritual energy shield. As there were too many of the blue demonic insects, the spiritual beasts that they released were all corroded, and the demonic insects began to corrode everyone's spiritual energy shield. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Kacha, one of the guard's spiritual energy barrier was corroded, and several blue demonic insects immediately pounced on the guard's body. Almost in an instant, the guard disappeared. On the deck, other than a storage ring, nothing else was corroded. The fear in everyone's hearts could no longer be described with words. This kind of fear was even stronger than the nine-headed strange snake they had encountered before. After all, they still had the ability to fight back against the nine-headed strange snake. However, these demonic insects were too strange. They did not even know what they were and what method they used to corrode their spiritual power. Although Yun Chujo was also very surprised, she still maintained her composure. She knew that this group of demonic insects definitely had a bug king or queen. If they wanted to escape, they had to capture the leader first. However, Yun Chujo did not find a bug king or queen after scanning for a long time. It was very likely that the bug king or queen was hiding under the water somewhere to command these subordinates. Then, the question was, should she dive underwater? This decision was undoubtedly very risky. Putting aside whether these demonic insects would dive underwater to attack her, this was the depths of the 10,000-year-old swamp. Danger lurked everywhere below. If she was not careful, she might sink into the mud and lose her life. What Yun Chujo did not know was that while she was hesitating, the Gowei Batsao on the ship was angry. There was no other reason. There were a few blind demonic insects that wanted to corrode it. Gowei Bakao's short temper immediately flared up. Damn it, it actually wanted to snatch its little treasury. In order to save these little treasury, how many grievances did it suffer? It could not tolerate the unbearable grass, it was simply courting death. At the same time, it sensed Yun Chujia's thoughts and shook its leaves. Was it the king of insects or the queen of insects? Alright, I'll leave this matter to it. It wanted to make these damn insects pay the price. Hence, Gowei Batsao whipped the few demonic insects that wanted to corrode it away and dived into the water. Everyone's attention was on the demonic insects, and with Gowei Batsao lying on the boat, no one noticed it at all. Chapter 51:15 Is it Gowei Batsao dived into the water, turned into a purple shadow and swam ahead quickly. It soon found that there were many algae growing under the surface of the water in the distance, and many blue demonic insects were coming in and out. It thought, it seems that the nest is in the algae, the darn insect king or queen must be in there. This fellow quickly approached a cluster of aquatic plants that had the highest density of demonic insects. Those demonic insects also discovered Gowei Batsao and surrounded it, wanting to attack it. Gowei Batsao immediately changed its body size to a foot tall and beat it with its leaves. Damn it! I told you to have designs on my little treasury, I'll beat you to death. I'll beat. I'll beat. I'll beat. I'll beat. With Gowei Batsao as the center, it instantly formed a vortex. Not to mention those demonic insects, even the surrounding algae were whipped away by this fellow. These demonic insects relied on the ability to corrode spiritual power, but the body of Gowei Batsao was impervious to all poisons. This so-called corrosive spiritual power was like a joke in front of it. If it wasn't for the 2 drops of liquid that saved debeiming, this fellow would have been even more smug. Gowei Batsao struggled for a while and only stopped when it realized that there were no more demonic insects around. It discovered that there were many tiny insect eggs in the water and was delighted. It seemed that this was the nest of those insects. At this moment, Goei Batsao discovered a demonic insect that was obviously much bigger than the other demonic insects and was drilling into the mud. It thought to itself, it seems that this is either the insect king or the insect queen, the culprit behind the theft of its small treasury. I'll kill it. Go Weiba thought of this and used the grass leaves to wrap up that demonic insect. It didn't expect that the demonic insect was so fast that it couldn't be caught. Go Weiba was so angry. Run, I told you to run. If I don't kill you today, I won't be called Goei Batsao. This fellow began to use the grass leaves to dig the mud, but the bottom of the swamp was full of mud. How could it be so easy to find that demonic insect? This guy could not find it even after searching for a long time, so he was so angry that he was twitching. At this time, countless demonic insects flew into the water. Apparently, they had received a distress message from the demonic insect. Go Weiba was powerful, but he could not withstand the number of those insects. This guy had no choice but to run away, like a wisp of smoke. However, this guy did not lose to grass, so he put his hands on his waist and cursed in his heart, "Damn it, you guys are lucky. Good grass does not fight with insects. Let's wait and see." At the same time, Yun Chujio and the others were stunned to find that the demonic insects actually retreated without a fight. Almost in an instant, they all returned to their original path and disappeared. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. What was going on? Yun Chujio thought to herself, could it be that something happened to their demon king or demon queen? It was really the blessing of God. The strange grass in her dantian was twitching. What god? It was Guai Chao. It was Guai Chao. It was Guai Chao. It was Go Weiba doing. Although Yun Chujio was surprised that the strange grass in her dantian was so excited, she did not have the time to pay attention to Guai Chao. She said to the crowd, no matter what the reason is, we should take this opportunity to pass through. What if those demonic insects come out of the water again? Mu Kelu asked worriedly. I guess that their sudden retreat should be due to problems with their queen insects or their queen insects. They won't appear again for a while. Moreover, they should have a living area. As long as we leave their range, we should be able to get rid of them, Yun Chujio explained. The Guai Chao in her dantian shook its leaves happily, indicating for Yun Chujio to let it out. Yun Chujio said impatiently with her spiritual sense, don't come out and cause trouble. Stay there obediently. Chapter 51:16 The aggrieved Goei Batsao was already beyond furious. Did this wretched girl know that if it wasn't for Go Weiba, they would still be surrounded by those demonic insects? Alright, she didn't know. Who asked Go Weiba to do a good deed without leaving a name? It wanted to leave a name, but it was afraid that its little treasury would be discovered. If that happened, it wouldn't be able to sneak out in the future. Therefore, even though it was sullen, it could only endure it. It cursed Hei Shinjo in its heart. What ingratitude! What ingrate! Whatever Yun Chujio had scolded it, it had returned it to her. Yun Chujio did not know that Guai Chao was scolding her. At this moment, she was fully alert as she commanded the 3 ships to pass through the area controlled by the demonic insects. At first, there was no reaction. After a while, countless demonic insects flew out. The demonic insects attached themselves to the spiritual energy shield of everyone and continuously corroded their spiritual energy. Everyone remembered Yun Chujio's words and did not fight back. They only raised their spiritual energy shield and tried to force their way through the water. A few demonic insects noticed the Goei Batsao on the ship, but they did not dare to attack it. They were afraid that this thing would go after their leader again. Goei Batsao snorted. At least they knew what was good for them. Otherwise, even if it did not want the last bit of money, it would still take care of them. Everyone used a lot of spirit energy to strengthen the spirit energy shield. Fortunately, after traveling for a distance, the demonic insects left helplessly. Everyone sat on the deck. The waves of crisis were really unbearable for them. Mu Kelu sighed. The 10,000-year-old swamp really lives up to its name. We've just entered the depths of the 10,000-year-old swamp, and we've already encountered these strange things. I'm afraid the situation inside will be even more terrifying. Qi Anqing echoed, that's right. There will definitely be dangers ahead, but we can only continue forward. Otherwise, we'll die from the Earth's qi. We're really unlucky this time. We have encountered Earth dragons before, but we have never heard of Earth qi chasing after people. How unlucky. The speaker did not mean it, but the listener meant it. He Xinjiu inexplicably felt a little guilty. Were these people all implicated by her? Or were they all implicated by the gigolo? Although the gigolo said that he was coming for him, there were no gigolo in the Taotai Ghost City and the Flying Flower Island. Didn't she also attract a natural disaster? Damn it, if he didn't want to kill her with heavenly lightning, he would use a natural disaster to deal with her. Who did she provoke? Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. However, speaking of the earth energy, He Xinjiu couldn't help but wonder. The earth energy had obviously spread to the 10,000-year-old swamp. Why didn't she see those demon beasts running around in panic? However, this guy understood after thinking for a while. The demon beasts in the swamp weren't like the demon beasts on land, which would run away in all directions when encountering a natural disaster. This was because once they left the 10,000-year-old swamp, it was basically a dead end. Since that was the case, it was better to leave it to fate. After all, the earth energy would not exterminate their species. In addition, these aquatic demon beasts had a strict sphere of influence. If they entered the sphere of influence of other demon beasts, they would also die. Therefore, they looked no different from usual. At this moment, the sky was already beginning to brighten. Yun Chujiu looked at the rising sun and thought of a sentence. No matter what happened today, the sun would rise the next day as usual. It was not a big deal. This fellow fed himself some chicken soup and immediately became lively again. What could not be passed was the difficulty. What was passed was tempered. A new day had begun. Chapter 51 17 Blood-sucking blanket. After eating breakfast, Yun Chujiu lay on the recliner and went back to sleep. Everyone was already used to this. Lan Dimeo had once reprimanded her, "You're so young, why are you so lazy?" Not only was she not ashamed, she even said with conviction, "I can't help it, I'm tired. Those good ideas were all thought of by me after putting in so much effort, how can I not be tired?" When everyone heard this, although they felt that she was being unreasonable, they let her be. Who asked her to be so smart? Gowei Batsao on the boat was in high spirits. This fellow never knew what it meant to be tired. From time to time, this fellow would secretly dive into the water and toss about. Since it was small in size, it would not be discovered. However, this fellow's spiritual energy was quickly almost used up, and he could not help but feel a little worried. How could he get the stinky girl to let him out? It would be best if it was a group of demonic beasts or something, so that the stinky girl could let him out. How about he do something to attract some demonic beasts over? This fellow thought about it and gave up on this plan. If it backfired and played the stinky girl to death, he would have no place to hide. At this moment, someone on the ship exclaimed, "What's that in front of us? Why does it look like a big woolen blanket?" Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Gowei Batsao immediately perked up. It really could do whatever it wanted. It was going to make more money from its little treasury. Compared to this fellow who only wanted chaos, the people on the boat were full of bewilderment. He Xinjiu was also woken up. She stood up and looked into the distance. There was a big gray object floating on the surface of the water in the distance. Looking from afar, it really looked like a woolen blanket. However, even if she used her heel to think, she knew that there was no wool blanket in this 10,000-year-old swamp. Could it be moss or algae? Yun Chujiu thought for a moment and said, "Stop moving forward and send a scout boat to test it out." However, at this moment, the wool blanket moved. The wool blanket that was originally flat curled up and the waves rolled. Everyone could vaguely see that the wool blanket seemed to be carrying a huge demon beast. What made everyone even more terrified was that the wool blanket was actually a living creature. They could vaguely see that its abdomen was filled with suckers, firmly sucking on the demonic beast. A moment later, the huge demonic beast's corpse floated on the surface of the water, and then sank to the bottom of the water. Mukila's voice was a little shaky as he said, "Strange, why didn't the monster that looked like the wool blanket eat that corpse?" Zhuang Ruhai said with a pale face, "If my guess is correct, the monster that looked like a woolen blanket lived on fresh blood. It only absorbed the monster's blood, so it threw the corpse away." Hearing this, everyone's hair stood on end. Blood-sucking? What the hell was this thing? It was too terrifying. Why was this 10,000-year-old swamp full of monsters? Not good. That blood-sucking carpet is swimming towards us. Qianchen cried out in alarm. Everyone immediately panicked. Even if they used their spiritual energy shields, it would not stop the monster from using its suction cups. It would easily capsize their boat. At that time, it would really be a dead end. Everyone did not care much. They quickly released their spiritual beasts, trying to block the blood-sucking carpet from approaching. The blood-sucking carpet dragged several spirit beasts into the water. Everyone's spirit beast's attack power in the water was greatly weakened, so they were not a threat to the blood-sucking carpet at all. The blood-sucking carpet was getting closer and closer to everyone's ship. Chapter 51:18 The weakness of the vampire carpet. Just when everyone was at a loss, no one expected that the vampire carpet would suddenly stretch out 2 arms and legs and flip a ship into the water. In an instant, a few people were wrapped up by the vampire carpet and quickly became dried-up corpses. They didn't even have the chance to scream. Everyone hurriedly used all kinds of attacks to pin down the blood-sucking carpet. Only then did the people who fell into the water take the opportunity to climb onto the remaining 2 ships. Qi Tianhui was also among the people who fell into the water. His face was pale. He roared at Yun Chujiu hysterically, "Yun Chujiu, aren't you smart? Think of a way. Are you going to watch us die?" Yun Chujiu was so angry that she laughed. This Qi Tianhui was most likely a pig's brain. She was also on the ship, so she naturally had to think of everything. Otherwise, she would also die, okay? However, she really could not think of any good ideas. This blood-sucking carpet was flat and very large. Regardless of whether it was a spiritual beast or all kinds of spiritual attacks, their effects on it were very limited. In addition, it had suction cups and tentacles, making it very difficult to deal with. If they were on land, they would naturally not be afraid of it. The bad thing was that they were in a swamp, so they were greatly restricted. Yun Chujiu observed for a long time, but she still could not find the weakness of the blood-sucking carpet. However, she knew that the blood-sucking carpet definitely had a weakness, but what was its weakness? Before Yun Chujiu could think of anything, the blood-sucking carpet had already stretched out its limbs towards her boat, trying to flip it over. Fortunately, old Tua used all his strength to swing his palm and hit one of the limbs to the side, thus escaping the disaster. Gowei Batsao on the side of the boat had been watching the show. This guy had almost made the little treasury proud, so even if he wanted to help, he couldn't. This guy originally wanted to take the initiative to ask for a fight, but when he thought of Yun Chujiu's attitude towards him, he immediately dismissed the idea. He wanted to wait for the stupid girl to take the initiative to ask him for a fight, so that he wouldn't think that Go Weiba was easy to bully. Yun Chujia's forehead was already covered with fine beads of sweat. It wasn't that she was afraid, but that she was anxious. If they still couldn't think of a way, they would all be sucked dry by this blood-sucking carpet. This damn blood-sucking carpet was as disgusting as the leeches in the secular world. Yun Chujiu thought of leeches and suddenly had a thought. She remembered that leeches were afraid of salt because leeches did not have skin. Once they touched enough salt, they would be dehydrated and die. Could this blood-sucking carpet also be afraid of salt? She was desperate. She took out a basin of salt and threw it at the blood-sucking carpet. The blood-sucking carpet was stretching out its arms and legs, ready to attack the ship Mukelu and the others were on. When the salt fell on it, it immediately retracted its arms and legs and dived into the water in a panic. Yun Chujo was overjoyed and shouted at the crowd, "It's afraid of salt. It's afraid of salt. If it comes out of the water again, use salt to wave it. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much." The crowd also saw the scene just now, but after hearing Yun Chuji's words, their faces did not show much joy. The reason was very simple. Their storage rings only had a few kilograms of salt at most, and some only had a few taels. After all, salt was only a seasoning. Who would bring a lot of salt with them for no reason? Yun Chujo seemed to have seen through their thoughts. She immediately threw more than 10 sacks of salt to Mukelu and the others and said in a heroic manner, "Don't worry. I have plenty here. As much as you want." Chapter 51:19 gave me an explanation. Everyone was surprised and happy. Naturally, they were happy that with the salt, they were not afraid of the blood-sucking carpet anymore. They were shocked that Yun Chujo brought so much salt for no reason. How would they know that this fellow cherished his life the most? To be on the safe side, he had even prepared hundreds of sacks for the sand, not to mention the salt. They didn't know if the blood-sucking carpet had heard Yun Chuji's words, but it didn't show itself again after diving into the water. They didn't think too much about it. Qi Anqing took out another swamp boat, and they continued to move forward as fast as they could. Seeing that the blood-sucking carpet didn't show itself again, Yun Chujo stingy put the sacks of salt back into her storage ring. What a joke. She had spent money to buy all this. Mukelu and the others were already used to her stingy behavior, so no one said anything. Instead, Qi Tianhui said with a strange tone, "Yun Chujo, since you knew that the blood-sucking carpet was afraid of salt, why didn't you say it earlier? Did you deliberately want to harm the people of our 3 families?" Yun Chujia's face suddenly darkened, and her eyes revealed some killing intent as she said coldly, "First, I also suddenly remembered that this blood-sucking carpet is somewhat similar to the leeches of the secular world, so I thought of using salt to restrain it. Second, if I wanted to harm the people of your 3 families, you would have already become corpses. Third, you have repeatedly provoked me with words. I was thinking of the big picture and didn't argue with you. I didn't expect you to become even worse. Senior Qi, if you do not give me a satisfactory explanation, we can only go our separate ways." Qi Anqing was so angry that he slapped Qi Tianhui twice. "This idiot. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much." Yun Chujo had played an absolute role in their escape. If they were separated from her, would they still have a chance of survival? Qi Ancheng's 2 slaps were merciless. Qi Tianhui's mouth instantly started to bleed. He shouted, "Grandfather, you actually helped that bitch beat me? I am your biological grandson." Qi Anqing saw that he was unrepentant and actually called Yun Chujo a slut. He was so angry that he kicked him twice. Finally, he simply said to his subordinates, "Tie him up and gag his mouth so that he doesn't spout nonsense." Immediately, a guard tied Qi Tianhui up and stuffed a rag into his mouth. Only then did Qi Anqing say to Yun Chujo, "Miss Yun, do you think this punishment is satisfactory?" Yun Chujo snorted coldly, "Up until now, he hasn't felt that he was wrong, and he hasn't apologized to me. However, I'm a kind-hearted person, so I won't argue with him." Qi Anqing was about to heave a sigh of relief when he heard Yun Chujo say, "However, if we let him off just like this, what if others learn from him? How about this, you compensate me with 100 million upper-grade spirit stones for the mental damage, and this matter will be considered over. Otherwise, you guys go your own way, we'll go our own way, and we'll part ways here." Qi Anqing was so angry that he was twitching. 100 million upper-grade spirit stones? Why didn't you rob them? Previously, the 3 families had already given her 100 million upper-grade spirit stones as a thank you gift, and now they actually wanted to blackmail the Qi family. They were truly insatiable. Although Qi Ansheng was extremely angry, he didn't dare to turn hostile. His heart turned a few times, and then he said, "Miss Yun, it's not that I don't agree. It's just that I came out in a hurry and didn't bring that many spiritual stones." Yun Chujia's eyes flashed. "Oh. How many spiritual stones do you have on you?" "Only 1 million left." Qi Ansheng didn't even want to give this 1 million, but he was afraid that Yun Chujio would break up, so he could only say with a pained expression. Chapter 51:20 A certain person who was in a bad mood. "Alright, 1 million then. Transfer it to me," Yun Chujio said. Qi Ansheng immediately transferred 1 million high-grade spirit stones to Yun Chujio. He felt that this matter should be considered over. Who would have thought that Yun Chujio would say, the remaining 99 million should be used as an IOU? Qi Ansheng, even though he was unwilling, Qi Ansheng still gritted his teeth and made an IOU. He hated her in his heart. After all, after leaving this 10,000-year-old swamp, this wretched girl would lose her life. This IOU was useless. After Qi Ansheng gave the IOU to Yun Chujio, he was so angry that he kicked Qi Tianhui twice. It was all because of this vile creature. Yun Chujio was in a good mood after receiving another sum of money. She began to leisurely wash the hot pot. When the people of the Lan family saw what she used to wash the hot pot, they were all dumbfounded. "Sorry for the inconvenience." "Thank you very much. Isn't this an alchemy furnace?" Previously, she used this alchemy furnace to refine detoxification pills for them. Why did she use it to wash the hot pot now? Yun Chujio ignored them and smilingly invited Elder Tua and Lan Dimeo to eat together. The two of them were not as big-hearted as her, so they both refused. However, Lan Luofang came over and said, "Little Jiu, it's boring to eat alone. I'll eat with you." Yun Chujio looked at her meaningfully. This guy was getting more and more shameless. Compared to Yun Chujio's good mood, the Gowei Batsao on the boat was very worried. She originally thought that Yun Chujio would beg it to help, but in the end, the other party solved the problem with a basin of salt and completely ignored it. If it had known earlier, it would have volunteered. Perhaps it had already accumulated a lot of small coffers. What a miscalculation. Hurry up and bring another powerful demonic beast. This way, it could accumulate a small coffer. Hei Shinjo naturally did not know of this fellow's sinister thoughts. She was eating enthusiastically. After this fellow had eaten and drunk his fill, he laid down on the recliner in satisfaction. He felt too happy. In fact, sometimes happiness was that simple. After surviving a disaster, a hot pot would make people so happy that they wanted to cry. This guy was cooking chicken soup for the soul in his heart while taking an afternoon nap with his eyes closed. Before falling asleep, she felt as if she had forgotten something. However, sleepiness struck her, so she did not think about it carefully and fell asleep in a daze. A certain someone in his sleeve pocket was so angry that he gritted his teeth. This ugly girl did not care about his life anymore. She had forgotten to feed him again. He had not eaten 3 meals. In fact, in the past, when Yun Chujio had forgotten to feed him, a certain someone would remind her. However, he was in a bad mood now and did not say anything in a fit of anger. Previously, when they met the 9-headed strange snake, Di Baiming reminded Yun Chujio to kill all 9 heads at the same time. Yun Chujio said, "Prince Charming, although you have lost your memory, you are still useful." At that time, a certain god felt a little unhappy. What did he mean by useful? Was he that useless in the ugly girl's heart? Yes, he admitted that he was indeed a little weaker now, but wasn't it because he was injured? Otherwise, why would he be so useless? Previously, when Buttface told him about the past, the ugly girl was very respectful and gentle to him. But now, she didn't take him seriously at all. If she didn't starve him, she would throw him into a wine jar. It was simply torture. Maybe she didn't like him anymore because he had become weak. That must be the case. The more he thought about it, the more difficult it became for a certain amnesiac snake. It also turned its grief and anger into motivation and began to cultivate without sleep or rest. He thought that when he recovered his strength, he would definitely make the ugly girl cry and kneel in front of him to repent. Chapter 5121 How busy are you? Yun Chujo slept until sunset. She stretched and stood up. Elder Tua saw that she had woken up and said with a serious expression, "Little Joe, I'm afraid we're in big trouble." Yun Chujo was stunned. Elder Tua had always been quiet and calm. What exactly happened? Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Elder Tua, what's wrong? Elder Tua pointed at the water and said, I found that the water level is getting lower and lower. Elder Tua did not continue, but Yun Chujo understood what he meant. There were two kinds of swamps in the Chongshao continent. One was a swamp, the top was fresh water, and the bottom was mud. The other was a swamp. It was all mud with only a few small puddles. Now that the water level was getting lower and lower, the depths of this 10,000-year-old swamp was most likely a swamp. There was very little water in the swamp, and it was simply not enough to support the swamp boat. Not to mention whether there were any powerful demon beasts inside. Even if there were no demon beasts, they would not be able to pass through. Mu Kelu and the others also noticed this, and everyone was frowning. Even though they were cultivators, the swamp was too terrifying, and there was simply no way to break through it. Yun Chujo frowned and thought for a long time, but she couldn't think of any solution. She found an excuse and went to the back of the cabin. She asked the small silver snake in her sleeve quietly, Prince Charming, do you have any good ideas? A certain venerable who was cultivating hard snorted, I'm so weak now, how can I have any ideas? Yun Chujo thought about the venerable's words and felt that something was wrong. Why did she feel a little sour? This guy blinked his eyes and then realized that he had not fed the little silver snake for quite a few meals. This guy suddenly felt a little guilty. Actually, it was not her fault. After encountering so many dangers, she did not have the time to feed him. Moreover, he was not a fool. Would he not remind her when he was hungry? He was really stupid. Yun Chujo immediately took out 2 meat buns and stuffed them into her sleeve pocket. She said with a smile, My idol, I was so busy that I forgot to bring you food. I'm sorry. A certain someone snorted coldly, Yes, you're so busy. You're busy eating hot pot. You're busy sleeping. Upon hearing that, Hei Xinjiu felt even more guilty. Yes, she had eaten hot pot with Lan Luofang previously, but she didn't think of feeding the pretty boy. No wonder he spoke so sourly. This guy had the principle of admitting his mistake and changing it. He said slyly, My idol, I was wrong. I'll definitely change it in the future. Besides, I forgot. Why didn't you remind me? A certain someone naturally wouldn't tell her what he was thinking. He snorted and didn't say anything. Hei Xinjiu didn't know that a certain someone was angry not only because she forgot to feed him, but also because she felt that he had calmed down. So, she went back to the main topic, Prince Charming, the swamp ahead is most likely a swamp. The swamp boat is definitely useless. How can we pass through it? Although Di Baiming was angry, he still knew the severity of the situation. He thought for a moment and said, the swamp might not be a swamp. Maybe there is a hard ground. Let's see the specific situation first. Yun Chujo nodded. Since she could not think of any good ideas, she would just have to deal with it. After talking about the serious matter, Hei Xinjiu was about to tease a certain lord when there was a commotion outside. Yun Chujo frowned and quickly walked to the deck. She quickly understood the reason for the commotion. Because the water level had dropped, the swamp ship could no longer move forward. Chapter 5122 Swamp, it's over. We're really dead now. There's a swamp in front of us, we'll die if we go in. I'd rather wait here to be swallowed by the earth chi than go forward. After all, if the earth chi is swallowed, we'll die directly, and well suffer less. It's better to die than to stay alive. What if the swamp isn't that deep? Everyone was discussing among themselves, and their faces were filled with panic. At this moment, the sky had already darkened. After a discussion, everyone decided to stay where they were and make their plans after daybreak. At night, everyone heard the roars of beasts coming from the quagmire in front of them from time to time, and they felt that there was no way to survive. That night, no one slept well except Hei Shinjo. This guy's idea was very simple. Since he couldn't think of any good ideas, he might as well have a good sleep. When the sky was getting bright, Hei Shinjo was pulled up by Lan Dimeo. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Don't sleep. The Earth aura is getting closer and closer. What should we do? Lan Dimeo shouted anxiously. He completely forgot that he was the leader. He did not know when it started, but Yun Chujo had become his backbone. Yun Chujo rubbed her eyes and looked into the distance. Last night, because the light was relatively dim, she could not see the situation in front of her clearly. Now that she looked at it, her heart was even colder. The swamp in front of her stretched as far as the eye could see. Other than some small hard ground, the rest were all swamps. There were some plants that were unique to the swamp growing in the swamp. They could also survive in the swamp. From afar, the swamp was decorated with colorful plants. Although it looked beautiful, it was full of killing intent. Once a person stepped on it, they would be swallowed by the mud. Occasionally, one could see some swamp demon beasts poking their heads out. Their eyes were filled with greed and desire as they looked at the crowd. It made people shudder. Yun Chujo frowned. If there were no beasts in the swamp, she could use some lighter wooden planks to barely pass through. However, there were beasts in the swamp. This plan would not work. Because those beasts could easily flip over the wooden planks. At that time, they could only become their food. When the crowd saw Yun Chujia's frown, they were even more uncertain. It was over. They were really dead now. As time passed, everyone became more and more anxious due to their panic. Someone tried to poke the swamp in front of them with a bamboo pole, wanting to see how deep it was. In the end, the conclusion was bottomless. This time, everyone became even more terrified. Yun Chujo knew that they could not delay any longer. She gritted her teeth and said, "Do you see it? The hard ground is about 2,000 feet away from us. We can throw some wooden boards down and use it as a support point to cross." Mukelu hesitated and said, "But if that's the case, we won't be able to turn back. If those demonic beasts besiege us, I'm afraid we'll be doomed." Yun Chujo nodded. "You're right. But now we have no other choice. If we delay any longer, we'll be swallowed by the earth chi." After hearing Yun Chujia's words, everyone split into two factions. One faction insisted on following Yun Chujia's instructions, while the other faction felt that it was better to stay where they were. The earth chi might not really come, and they might not even lose their lives. Everyone has their own aspirations and cannot be forced. If you want to follow me, then follow my instructions. Yun Chujo glanced at everyone and said. The Lan family naturally listened to Yun Chujo and immediately threw some large wooden planks onto the swamp. Chapter 51-23 Your little cutie is still here. Mukelu and the others were in a dilemma. Should they follow or not? Chi Tianhui had regained his freedom and immediately said, "Grandfather, don't listen to Yun Chujo. She is courting death. Even if we can successfully reach the hard ground in front, we will not be able to walk out of this swamp." Chi Anqing ignored him and looked at Mukelu and Zhuang Ruhai. "What do you two think?" Zhuang Ruhai gritted his teeth. "We'll definitely die if we stay here. Why don't we give it a try? After all, that Yun Chujo is full of tricks. Who knows, she might come up with some other good ideas." Mukelu thought for a moment and said, "I agree with Brother Zhuang. Once the earth chi arrives, we'll definitely die. Since that's the case, we might as well follow that Yun Chujo." Qianqing saw the two of them and nodded. All right, then we will follow them. After the three of them discussed, they followed the Lan family's method and began to throw wooden planks into the swamp to act as support points. Qi Tianhui's eyes were red as he said, "Grandfather, don't be stupid. If you go, you will be throwing your life away. Anyway, I will not leave the swamp ship." Qianqing looked at him deeply and then said to the crowd, "If you're willing to follow, then follow. If you're not, then stay." Mu Kalu and Zhuang Ruhai also said the same thing. Life and death were determined by fate, and it all depended on one's own luck. When the crowd was almost done tossing the wooden boards, Yun Chuzhou said, "Those demonic beasts have been eyeing us like tigers watching their prey. Therefore, we can't go blindly. We have to strategize. We have to move forward according to the difference in cultivation level. This way, once those demonic beasts attack, those with higher cultivation level can protect those with lower cultivation level. We have to set up a spiritual energy barrier throughout the entire journey to avoid being attacked. Also, don't follow closely, lest the wooden boards can't bear the weight." Yun Chuzhou looked at Elder Tua and said, "Elder Tua, your cultivation level is the highest. Would you be willing to be the first to go?" Yun Chuzhou handed him a lot of wooden boards after Elder Tua agreed. Because the wooden boards that were thrown by the others could not be thrown so far, he needed to throw some wooden boards as a supporting point as he moved forward. After the discussion was over, Elder Tua took the lead to jump down from the swamp boat. He tapped on a wooden board with the tip of his foot and his body instantly moved to another wooden board. After crossing two more planks, he threw the plank in his hand to the front as a support point, and then smoothly jumped onto the hard ground. "Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much." With Hunchback as a demonstration, everyone immediately jumped onto the hard ground in the order they had discussed. The swamp demon beasts did not come over to attack. Clearly, they were still in the wait-and-see stage. Moreover, they felt that it was not a bad thing to let everyone jump onto the hard ground. It would be more convenient for them to hunt. Qianqing looked at Qi Tianhui again. "Tianhui, are you really going to stay here?" Qi Tianhui saw that everyone had successfully arrived at the hard ground. He also saw that the earth aura in the distance was getting closer and closer. He gritted his teeth and said, "Grandfather, I'll go with you." Qianqing nodded and let Qi Tianhui follow behind him. This way, he could also take care of him. Yun Chuzhou watched coldly from the side. Not to mention anything else, this Qianqing was really good to Qi Tianhui. She wanted to take advantage of her grandfather. It had been a few years since she last saw him. She wondered if he was doing well. Qi Tianhui changed his mind, and the people who were supposed to stay hesitated. People always followed the crowd. In the end, they followed Yun Chuzhou and the others to the hard ground. Before Yun Chuzhou left, she did not forget to put away the swamp boat. The Gowei Batsao on the side of the boat was afraid of being exposed, so it jumped into the water. In the end, she could only watch as Yun Chuzhou walked on the wooden board like a swallow. The messy Gowei Batsao in the water. "Hey! Did you forget something? Your little cutie is still here." Chapter 51-24 It was the little cutie Gowei Batsao was already numb to being abandoned, because it was now a nameless little treasury. This guy decided to rely on himself, so he swam towards the hard ground where everyone temporarily settled down. In fact, the word swim was not very accurate, because this guy complained that the mud was too dirty, so he used the grass leaves as small wings to glide from the colorful plants to the hard ground. The colorful swamp plants gave the Gowei Batsao a good cover. In addition, everyone's attention was not here, so the Gowei Batsao glided smoothly to the hard ground. In order not to be dumped again, this fellow spent a long time before carefully lying on He Xinjia's hair. Yun Chuzhou naturally did not know about this. Her mind was now focused on how to cross the swamp. She knew that although the swamp demonic beasts did not attack just now, if they moved again, the demonic beasts would definitely take action. They did not need to expend too much effort. As long as they dragged people into the swamp, they would be able to enjoy it effortlessly. The others had also thought of this and turned their gazes towards Yun Chujo. Yun Chujo looked at the demon beasts that were eyeing the swamp. She thought to herself, why don't we capture a few demon beasts to play with? With them as guards, although they could not solve the problem completely, they could at least buy time. However, these demon beasts were not easy to capture. They had to think of a way. Lan Dimeo and the others saw that Yun Chujo did not say anything, so they urged her anxiously, what should we do next? Should we stay here? Yun Chujo blinked her eyes, no rush, I will feed the demonic beasts first, then we will go over. Everyone was angry and happy. Fed? The demonic beasts were the most greedy, and there were so many of them, how could she feed them? Yun Chujo did not care about their reaction. She took out a piece of demonic beast meat and shouted at the swamp demonic beasts in the distance, hey, little cuties, Miss has meat here, come here quickly. The swamp demonic beasts were dumbfounded. This stupid girl, was she crazy? The leaves of the Gowei Butsao on Yun Chujia's hair shook. Bah! How could they be called little cuties? She was the real little cutie, alright? Yun Chujo smacked her lips a few more times, then threw the demonic beast meat with all her might. The place where the demonic beast meat fell was still some distance away from the swamp demonic beasts. The swamp demonic beasts did not understand what Yun Chujia's intention was, so none of them made a move. Seeing this, Chi Tianhui snorted and said, save it. Those demonic beasts are not idiots. How could they eat the demonic beast meat you threw? Yun Chujo glanced at him. Then how about I throw you down? Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Chi Tianhui was angry and scared. He was about to refute, but he was frightened by Chi Ancheng's cold gaze and did not dare to say anything. Yun Chujo did not continue to pay attention to this idiot Chi Tianhui. She took out another piece of demonic beast meat and said, you don't know, right? This is the meat of the nine-headed strange snake that looks like the nine neonate. Maybe it will increase your spiritual power greatly after eating it. Everyone was stunned. Previously, when they saw Yun Chujo put away the nine-headed strange snake's corpse, they thought that she was selling it for money. They did not expect that it was not the case. When the swamp demonic beasts heard Yun Chujia's words, some of them were tempted. After all, the nine-headed strange snake's level was much higher than theirs. If they could eat its meat, it would definitely benefit their cultivation. Chapter 5125. Although the swamp demonic beasts were somewhat tempted, they were still somewhat on guard and didn't go forward. I say, what are you afraid of? Afraid that it'll poison you? TSK, isn't the nose of your demonic beasts very sensitive? If I poison you, you won't notice? Or is it that you're naturally timid and don't dare to come even half a step closer to us? Yun Chujo curled her lips and said. Those swamp demon beasts roared angrily, as if they wanted to tear Yun Chujo into pieces. What are you shouting for? What's so great about your loud voice? My goal is very simple. I want to feed you guys until you're full, so that you won't find trouble with us. Eat or not. As Yun Chujo spoke, she threw out a few pieces of demon beast meat. One of the swamp bloodthirsty crocodiles couldn't resist the fragrance of the flesh and swam to a piece of demon beast meat with its courage. It sniffed the meat and swallowed it. Seeing that there was no abnormality, it immediately pounced on another piece of demonic beast meat nearby. Seeing that it was gobbling down the meat, the other swamp demonic beasts immediately let down their guard and started to fight for it. The battle between these demonic beasts caused the nearby swamp to splash up, and the roars were incessant. When everyone saw this scene, they guessed that Yun Chujia's intention was to make them kill each other. However, they were probably daydreaming. Yun Chujo ignored them and continued to throw the demonic beast meat forward. However, the closer she threw, the closer she got. The demonic beasts were all red-eyed from eating, so they wouldn't have noticed this. Besides, they didn't take Yun Chujo and the others seriously at all. In this swamp, they were the masters. Yun Chujo said to old Tua and the others in a low voice, "I'll lure a few demonic beasts over later. You guys help me pull them up." Everyone was confused. What did she mean by, pull them up? However, they quickly understood what Yun Chujo meant. That was because they saw that the few pieces of demonic beast meat that Yun Chujo had just thrown out had transparent threads attached to them. Clearly, there was a hook hidden in the meat. Those swamp demonic beasts did not know that there was something fishy going on. They swallowed the demonic beast meat with a gulp before their jaws were hooked by the hook. Pull. Yun Chujo narrowed her eyes. Did she think that it was easy to take advantage of Fairy Jo? Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Everyone took the thread Yun Chujo handed them and tried their best to pull the swamp beasts up. After the swamp beasts realized that they had been tricked, they tried to bite the thread off. However, the thread was very thin, and their teeth couldn't use any force. They were so angry that they wanted to use brute force to break the thread, but the thread was very strong and couldn't be broken in a short time. They let out a cry for help and wanted the other swamp beasts to help, but the swamp beasts wanted to have fewer competitors, so they wouldn't save them. Therefore, 5 unlucky fellows were dragged onto the hard ground. Yun Chujo immediately restrained their spiritual power, then said with a smile, "Is the demon beast meat delicious? Since you ate my demon beast meat, you are my beasts." The 5 swamp beasts were half dead from anger. Did this stupid girl want to subdue them? They all had integrity. This stupid human trying to subdue them was simply wishful thinking. Yun Chujo took out a large kitchen knife and waved it in front of them. There are 2 choices. One is that I chop you up and feed you to the other demon beasts, and the other is to establish a temporary contract with me. It's your choice. The 5 swamp demon beasts thought for a moment. Compared to their integrity, their lives seemed to be more important, so they cowered. Just as Yun Chujo was feeling proud, someone exclaimed, "Oh my god! What is that? Is it the legendary mermaid clan?" Chapter 51-26 Yun Chujo was shocked. She looked in the direction of the person's finger, but only saw a figure. The black fish tail glided quickly on the mud, but its upper body was covered by long black hair. No one could tell if it was a man or a woman. Everyone was in an uproar. Oh my god, it must be the legendary merman. I didn't expect there to be a merman in this 10,000-year-old swamp. Yes, it must be mermaids. Although we didn't see the front, the upper body is clearly in the shape of a human. That's not right. Didn't they say that mermaids live in the deep sea? Why would they appear in the 10,000-year-old swamp? Everyone discussed animatedly. They even temporarily put aside their current predicament. The main reason was that they were too shocked. Mermaids were legendary existences. Not to mention other things, their tears were water-repellent beads. Yun Chujo squinted her eyes and felt that something was wrong. However, she quickly retracted her gaze because the most important thing was to form a contract with the 5 swamp beasts first. Just as Yun Chujo was about to form a temporary contract with the 5 swamp beasts, a mournful song was heard in the swamp. It was more like a song than a song, because there were no lyrics, only an ethereal and mournful melody. Everyone felt their hearts tremble, and then some people shed tears. The beasts in the swamp immediately chased after the figure, and even the 5 beasts on the hard ground struggled to get over. Yun Chujo narrowed her eyes, took out a large copper basin, and started to hit it with a rolling pin. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. As she hit it, she sang, 2 tigers, 2 tigers. They run fast, they run fast. One has no eyes, and the other has no tail. Everyone shuddered and came back to their senses. They could not help but feel some lingering fear. It was rumored that the singing of mermaids could seduce people's souls. If Yun Chujo did not wake them up, they might have lost their lives. The swamp beasts were also awakened by Yun Chujo's singing. They fled in all directions in panic and disappeared into the swamp. The mermaids, in front of them, paused for a moment and then entered the swamp as well, as if nothing had happened. The crowd naturally discussed again. Yun Chujo ignored them and quickly established a temporary contract with the 5 swamp beasts. This fellow had always been a useless name maker and was too lazy to use his brain. He directly called them Big Fool, Second Fool, Third Fool, Fourth Fool, and Fifth Fool. The 5 newly made fools, how were they stupid? But that was also true. They had lost their freedom because of a few pieces of demon beast meat. They were indeed stupid enough. Yun Chujo glanced at them and said, "You guys dive into the mud now and see if there are any other demon beasts. If there aren't, we can move to the hard ground in front." Big Dummy said, "There's no need to look. There definitely aren't any other beasts. They were scared away by the messenger just now and don't dare to show themselves for a while." Yun Chujo narrowed her eyes. "Messenger? Why do you call it a messenger? Is it really a merman?" "Because it's that man's subordinate, we call it a messenger. As for whether it's a merman or not, we're not sure because we've never seen its face before," Big Dummy explained. "That person? Who is it?" Yun Chujo asked in confusion. Silly and the others shivered. "That is a very terrifying existence. As long as it wants to, none of us will survive. I advise you to not go in. You won't be able to get out of this 10,000-year-old swamp." Chapter 51-27 Literary and Artistic Beasts. Yun Chujo felt that it would be difficult to get to the bottom of it with just a few words, so she might as well take advantage of the absence of the demonic beasts and hurry on her way. Thus, she had the 5 fools stay alert in the swamp and instructed everyone to move to the hard ground in front of them. Everyone did not know what Yun Chujo and the 5 fools had said, and Yun Chujo did not intend to tell them. If these people knew that there was a terrifying existence in there, they would definitely be cautious. Since that was the case, they might as well not tell them. Following the previous method, they used the wooden board as a support point and successfully moved to another piece of hard ground. In this way, they moved dozens of pieces of hard ground. Although there was a small mistake in the middle, there was no major mishap. However, they soon encountered a problem. The distance between the hard ground was getting larger and larger. It was impossible to jump over using the wooden plank as a support. Just as the group was frowning, Yun Chujo's gaze fell on the 5 fools. The 5 fools suddenly had a bad premonition. If time could be reversed, they would definitely not eat the demonic beast meat. Unfortunately, it was already too late. "Sorry for the inconvenience." "Thank you very much." Yun Chujo had the 5 fools line up in the middle as a place for everyone to rest. This way, everyone could smoothly reach the hard ground. Although the 5 fools were extremely unhappy, they had no choice but to compromise. After everyone had moved to the hard ground, Yun Chujo said to the 5 fools, "As the saying goes, it's better to be happy alone than to be happy together. We can share happiness and difficulties together. You guys hook up with a few demonic beasts, and I'll also contract them." The 5 fools felt that it made sense. When they were in trouble, none of the demonic beasts came out to help, so there was no psychological pressure to frame them. The 2 fools smiled sinisterly and said, "The sky will turn dark soon, and they will come out to look for food. When the time comes, we will help you lure a few." Yun Chujo nodded and fed them some demon beast meat as a reward. Then, she asked about the previous matter again. Originally, everyone's strength in this swamp was about the same, so it could be considered peaceful. However, a few years ago, that person suddenly appeared and occupied the celestial pond in the middle of the swamp. Speaking of which, it was rather cowardly. Until now, we still didn't know what that person looked like. Because once we got close to the celestial pond, we would be muddle-headed. It was already good enough for us to keep our lives. How would we have the leisure to look at that person's appearance? Not to mention that person, we've only seen the back of his emissaries. Big Silly said somewhat gloomily. Second Silly added from the side, "That's right. That person is really too mysterious. Fortunately, it has always been nestled in the celestial pond and didn't come out. It only occasionally sends emissaries to catch a few demonic beasts. Yun Chujo pursed her lips. That thing really knew how to be mysterious. However, what was the celestial pond? Upon hearing Yun Chuji's question, Silly explained, although our swamp is full of mud, there is a hot spring at the center of the swamp. Miraculously, a pool of water formed within a radius of a few thousand feet around the hot spring. The bottom of the pool is not mud but white sand. The hot spring was not only extremely clear, but it was also filled with spiritual energy. That was why it was called the Celestial Pool. Before that person came, we could all go in to soak in it. However, ever since it came, we could only think about it in our hearts. Sigh, the days of soaking in the hot spring and thinking about the birth of beasts are gone forever. Yun Chujo found it funny in her heart. Each of these swamp beasts was uglier than the other, and each of them was a literary beast. Chapter 5128 was pretentious Butt-Face, who was in the spirit beast bag, asked eagerly, "Little fairy, what is an artistic beast?" Yun Chujo wanted to say that an artistic beast was like an artistic youth, but after thinking about it, Butt-Face didn't know what an artistic youth was, so he simply said, simply put, as demonic beasts, they actually have the time to think about beast life, so they are called artistic beasts. Butt-Face blinked his dog eyes. Oh, I know. They are just pretentious. Yun Chujo ignored Butt-Face. Instead, she asked the 5 idiots to hook up with a few demonic beasts and get old Tua and the others ready for battle. Although they were not good at fighting in the swamp, there were still many of them. With the help of the 5 idiots, it was not a problem to catch a few unlucky ones. After a while, the 5 idiots hooked up with 3 demon beasts. The 5 idiots were actually very smart. The reason why they only hooked up with 3 was because even if Yun Chujo and the others did not help, the 5 of them would not be at a disadvantage. Yun Chujo successfully contracted these 3 demon beasts, and then let the 8 of them continue to harm the other demon beasts. Everyone looked at Yun Chujo with more and more surprise. Although these demon beasts were not particularly high in rank, it was already good enough for an average person's spiritual sense to contract 5 of them. She actually contracted 8 of them and still had the strength to continue the contract. Along with Silly and the others continuously luring the demonic beasts over, Yun Chuji's number of demonic beasts grew like a snowball. Moreover, as the number of Silly and the others increased, there was no need to waste effort in coaxing them. They might as well use force. If they didn't follow them over, they would directly bite them to death. In any case, they wouldn't feel guilty at all if they outnumbered them. Very quickly, all the demonic beasts within a radius of several hundred li were scared away. Those that didn't escape became He Xinjia's subordinates. Everyone was already scared out of their wits. Especially Qi Tianhui. He did not dare to provoke her again. What a joke. If this fiend was not satisfied, he could take his life at any time. Mu Kalu and the rest were also scared out of their wits. They became more and more fearful of Yun Chujo, but they did not dare to have any bad thoughts for the time being. Yun Chujo was in a good mood. She already had dozens of swamp demonic beasts. Tomorrow, she could let these swamp demonic beasts use large wooden boards to transport everyone between hard ground. The speed would be much faster. However, she always felt that the thing in the celestial pond and the so-called messengers were a bit strange. She didn't believe that they were mermaids. Because the big brother of the mermaids had clearly told her that he was the only one left of the mermaids. The rest were already dead. How could mermaids appear out of nowhere? Then, what exactly were they? Yun Chujo had no idea at the moment. She could only find a spot and lie down to rest. The swamp was protected by the swamp beasts. There were people on duty on the hard ground, so she slept exceptionally soundly. The next morning, everyone set off again. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Yun Chujo let the swamp beasts drag the wooden boards and moved everyone to the other hard ground. At the beginning, everyone was still a little scared, afraid that the beasts would throw them into the swamp if they were not careful. However, fortunately, the beasts were still reliable. Although they would sometimes make them fall, they did not really fall. Yun Chujo naturally could not let the swamp beasts work for free. Therefore, not only did she feed them the beast meat, she also gave them some pills. Of course, this fellow turned around and exploited a lot of good things from the other three families. What a joke. She wasn't stupid, how could she suffer such a loss? Chapter 51-29, quickly use the Sanskrit mantra to kill. Just as things were progressing smoothly, an ethereal song sounded. The eyes of the swamp demon beasts instantly became lost. The people on the wooden board were also somewhat stunned. Seeing this, Yun Chujo thought, this is bad. She hurriedly took out a copper basin and began to knock. Wake up! Everyone wake up! Although Yun Chujo intervened in time, there was still a wooden board that fell. The few people standing on it fell into the swamp. They were Lan Luofang and the others. Yun Chujia's expression changed. She ordered the demonic beasts to pull Lan Luofang and the others out and then dragged them to the hard ground. Yun Chujo quickly used water to wash away the mud on their bodies. Fortunately, they used their spiritual power to protect their noses and mouths. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Seeing that they were safe and sound, Yun Chujo heaved a sigh of relief and looked up into the distance. Just like what she saw yesterday, there was still a mermaid-like figure singing non-stop. Yun Chujo shouted coldly, "Shut up! You still have the nerve to come out after singing so badly? Get as far away as you can. If you come out again, I'll kill you." The mermaid was obviously shocked by Yun Chujia's words. The tune that it was humming suddenly went out of tune, and then it sneaked into the swamp. "Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much." Yun Chujo thought that the mermaid might come out to cause trouble. Therefore, she asked everyone to take out something that could make a sound. Once the mermaid came out again, she would use the sound to disturb it. As expected, when everyone moved again, the mermaid appeared again. However, everyone was already prepared. They all showed their abilities. Some were playing the zither, some were playing the flute, and some were hitting pots and pans. The mermaid could only dive back into the swamp in anger. Silly, and the others sighed in their hearts. Humans were indeed smarter than them. Why didn't they think of this trick in the first place? No wonder the stinky girl gave them such a name. However, whether it was Yun Chujo or the demon beasts in the swamp, they clearly thought the matter was too simple. When they thought that the mermaid would not appear for the time being, 5 mermaids actually appeared in the distance. They chanted at the same time. The sounds made by the crowd did not work. Instead, they quickly fell into a daze. Among the crowd, only Old Tua and Yun Chujo remained awake. Old Tua was able to remain awake for the time being due to his high cultivation level. Yun Chujo, this pervert, had a black bead in her body. Naturally, she was not afraid of these things. At this moment, the eyes of the demonic beasts were dull. They wanted to swim in the direction of the mermaids. Therefore, the wooden boards they were supporting capsized one after another, and everyone fell into the swamp. What was worse was that everyone's expression was dull. They did not even put up their spiritual energy shields. If they were to delay any longer, none of them would survive. As the wooden boards that Old Tua and Yun Chujo were on were at the front, the moment the wooden boards capsized, the tips of their toes leaped onto the hard ground in front of them. Elder Tua shouted, "Sanskrit! Quick! Sanskrit!" Yun Chujo thought that she didn't know how to use Sanskrit, but she couldn't care less about that now. She immediately took out a piece of jade Bodhi leaf and started to play it. The magical thing was that the moment Yun Chujia's music started, the demonic beasts and everyone regained their clarity. Yun Chujo had told everyone before that if they were unlucky enough to fall into the swamp, they shouldn't struggle recklessly. They should try their best to keep their bodies level and slow down the speed of the fall. Therefore, when everyone regained their consciousness, they did not struggle in a panic. Instead, they followed Yun Chuji's instructions and waited for rescue. Chapter 51:30. Without Yun Chuji's order, those demonic beasts quickly dragged everyone to the hard ground. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Seeing that the 5 mermaids had already dived into the swamp, Yun Chujo also stopped playing. This guy was puzzled. She didn't seem to have used any Sanskrit sound just now. She just randomly blew a few times, and it actually worked. Perhaps it was because one thing could subdue another. After all, the glazed Bodhi leaf was a Zen item, and it had a restraining effect on some evil things. After everyone was dragged to the hard ground, they slowed down for a while. After counting the number of people, dozens of people still died. Although it was very regrettable, it couldn't be helped. Lan Luofang glanced around and found that there were no members of the Lan family among the dead. Her heart moved, and she guessed that little Nine must have told those demonic beasts to save the members of the Lan family first. Lan Luofang's guess was right. Yun Chujo was not a good person, so she naturally put the Lan family members first. As for the other 3 families, well, it was up to fate. After such a struggle, it was already evening. However, the group did not rest and continued to move forward. The reason was very simple. The earth chi was spreading faster. Yun Chujo felt that the earth chi was forcing them to get close to the so-called celestial pond as soon as possible. What secret was hidden there? In the next 2 days, Yun Chujo and the others traveled day and night. During this process, they subdued some demonic beasts, which made their speed increase quite a bit. The mermaids seemed to have disappeared and didn't appear again. However, everyone knew that there was probably a bigger crisis waiting for them. Even if they knew this, they could only continue forward because they had no way out. That night, Yun Chujo judged the progress of the earth energy spread and decided to let everyone rest for the night. After all, the demon beasts couldn't bear to travel through the night. Yun Chujo took out the demon beast meat and pills and fed them to the demon beasts in the swamp. She also praised them a few times in order to boost their morale. The Gowei Batsao on Yun Chuji's head shook its leaves. This wretched girl was used to buying people's hearts. No, the heart of the beast. This fellow had been very obedient these few days. It was not that it had learned its lesson, but that it did not dare to show off because there was not much left in its small treasury. Its current color was already very light. It was very anxious in its heart. If the wretched girl still did not let it out, it was afraid that it could only disappear. This fellow cursed in its heart. These swamp demon beasts were each more stupid than the last. Why didn't any of the more powerful ones come over to cause trouble? If there was someone who wanted to cause trouble, could it be released? However, it was probably useless even if there was someone who wanted to cause trouble. The stinky girl had already subdued more than 100 demon beasts. If one came, one would die. How could he let the stinky girl let him out for a stroll? Thus, the Guai Chao in his dantian began to act cutely. Yun Chujo thought that it wanted to eat the pills, so she secretly swallowed 2 bottles of pills behind everyone's back. Unexpectedly, Guai Chao was still acting cuter than before. Yun Chujo frowned and cursed with her spiritual sense, 2 bottles aren't enough. Are you a pig? Yun Chujo ignored Guai Chao after cursing. Gowei Batsao held its breath. It was such an amazing existence, but it actually suffered all kinds of grievances because it couldn't speak. How could it be reasonable? After Yun Chujo finished scolding Guai Chao, she began to chew on the meat bun. This time, she didn't forget a certain someone. She stuffed a meat bun into her sleeve. A certain someone who was diligently cultivating snorted. This ugly girl still had some conscience. The snort of a certain someone wasn't loud, but Yun Chujo still heard it. She pursed her lips. This tsundere. Chapter 51:31, What's Going On? After dinner, Yun Chujo told the little silver snake about some of her guesses and thoughts in a low voice and said, Prince Charming, do you think the person in the celestial pond is Brother Mermaid? Although I don't think it's possible, I haven't seen him for a long time. I don't know how he is now. Yun Chujo had mentioned the matter of the mermaid brother to a certain someone when she was talking about Lan Luochen. Hence, the amnesiac snake did not have a good impression of the so-called mermaid brother at all. Since it was a fish, it had to have the self-awareness of a fish and just stay there. Why would it always appear in front of the ugly girl? The ugly girl even said that the fish was so beautiful. It was really ridiculous. How good could a fish be? Could it be that the fish scales were brighter than other fish? Yun Chujo saw that a certain someone didn't say anything, so she could only repeat, Prince Charming, do you think the one in the celestial pond is Big Brother Mermaid? What are those envoys? A certain someone said unhappily, I don't know how to calculate, who knows what that thing is. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. However, I'm warning you, I've already noticed that this 10,000-year-old swamp is full of dangers. Don't let your greed for beauty get in the way of proper business. Yun Chujo, without waiting for Yun Chujo to speak, a certain lord continued, although the voices of those emissaries sounded ethereal, they were mixed with some evil energy. It's absolutely impossible for them to be the voices of mermaids. Moreover, the mermaids love cleanliness the most. It's impossible for them to survive in this swamp. Yun Chujo nodded. She thought so too. Those emissaries were definitely not mermaids. She just didn't know if the one in the celestial pond was the big brother of the mermaids. Since the disappearance of the big brother mermaid, although she had seen him a few times, it was only his spiritual sense. She had never seen his real body. His real body must have been trapped somewhere. Logically speaking, it would not appear here. Just as Yun Chujo was thinking, a certain someone hesitated and asked, Is that mermaid really very good-looking? Yun Chujo recalled the mermaid's beautiful face and immediately nodded, Yes, let me tell you, I have never seen such a good-looking man. The body of a certain amnesiac snake instantly stiffened and then snorted coldly, since that mermaid looks very similar to Lan Luochen, then it means that it looks just like that. Your taste is really not that good. Although they look very similar, the eyes of the mermaid brother are blue, and the temperament is different. Although the mermaid brother is sad, he doesn't have Lan Luchen's stubbornness. He doesn't touch the secular world at all. He's ethereal like a legendary figure. Every time Yun Chujo said something, the silver snake's body stiffened. It felt like its heart was about to explode. Wasn't it just a broken fish? What did she mean by not being tainted by the secular world? What did she mean by being ethereal? She was simply spouting nonsense. While Yun Chujo was still spouting nonsense, a certain venerable snorted coldly. Enough. This venerable one still needs to cultivate. I don't have time to listen to your nonsense here. Yun Chujo rolled her eyes. He was the one who wanted to ask, and now he was complaining about her insolence. What a lunatic. Yun Chujo was about to turn around and leave when a certain someone said coldly, You don't have to worry too much. If the situation is urgent, I will protect you. Yun Chujo curled the corners of her lips. Use your pot. A certain someone, he shouldn't have been soft-hearted. This ugly girl deserved to be taught a lesson. Chapter 51:32. Although Yun Chujo said that, her heart felt warm. However, she knew that Di Baiming said that he would protect her, so he would definitely pay a huge price. He might even lose his life. She would never allow that to happen. Prince Charming, you have to believe in me as I believe in you. I can do it, but you must not take the risk. Di Baiming wanted to say something, but he did not know what to say. Thus, the man and the snake did not speak again. Although it was quiet, Di Baiming's heart rippled. This strange yet familiar feeling made his heart soften. After a long silence, Yun Chujo suddenly thought of Qi Ying, who had not moved for a long time. It was better to ask him. Perhaps he could find out what those mermaids were. Therefore, Yun Chujo used her spiritual sense to scan the spirit beast bag. She saw Qiying hiding in a corner, looking as if he could not afford to live. His eyes were dull, like a stupid rabbit. Yun Chujo touched her nose. Qiying seemed a little miserable. However, she had no choice. This guy was a hardcore fan of the Divine Devil Hall Master. If she did not do this, she might be harmed by him. Yun Chujo sent a message to the Red Shadow Rabbit through Butt Face. Qiying, do you know of a demonic beast that looks like a mermaid? The Red Shadow Rabbit didn't move, but its eyes moved slightly. It said coldly, I don't know. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Then do you know of a hot spring in the depths of the 10,000-year-old swamp? I don't know. Sigh, but that's true. Your status in the Divine Devil Hall isn't that high, and you're being ostracized. Naturally, your knowledge is limited. This so-called purple mask of yours is just a decoration. In reality, you don't know anything at all. Qiying's rabbit eyes revealed some anger, but he didn't say anything. Yun Chujo curled her lips. This Qiying had learned from his mistakes, and he was becoming more and more difficult to deal with. Yun Chujo sneered and said, Qiying, I won't beat around the bush with you. Anyway, if I die, you won't be able to live either. It's up to you. Qiying also sneered and said, it's better to die than to look like this. Whatever. Yun Chujo rolled her eyes and said, is that so? Your body has already been destroyed. Perhaps you have been slandered as a traitor of the Divine Devil Hall. TSK, even if you die, you have to die with the name of a traitor. How disappointed your lord must be. Also, your bullshit master definitely doesn't know about the matters in the demon region. Don't you want to go back and inform the others? Qiying was moved by Yun Chuji's words. He said coldly, there's a type of demon beast called General. It has a fish tail and long hair on its head and back. From its back, it looks very similar to a mermaid. It's said that Gen can produce a sound similar to a human humming and can confuse people. It doesn't have any other abilities. Yun Chujo nodded. It seemed that those things should be the Gen that Qiying mentioned. What about the things in the hot spring? Qiying said impatiently, I don't know. I didn't see what was inside. Yun Chujo saw that she couldn't ask any more questions, so she didn't continue to ask. At least she knew that the Gen didn't have any other attacking methods, so she could be slightly relieved. The next morning, everyone continued to move forward. Big Silly said eagerly, do you see the hard ground in front? The celestial lake is in the middle of the hard ground. Yun Chujo looked over. Because she was far away, she could only vaguely see the shimmering waves. She did not see the terrifying existence that the Gen and Big Silly mentioned. Chapter 5133 The Celestial Pond. Fortunately, there was a hard ground near the celestial pond. They could rest on the hard ground for the time being and then make plans for the next step. When it was almost noon, everyone arrived at the hard ground closest to the celestial pond. The celestial pond not far away was quiet. Other than feeling the rich spiritual energy, it didn't seem to be any different from the ordinary pond water. However, Big Silly and the others kept quiet out of fear. None of them dared to go there rashly. Everyone wanted to go around it, but the 10,000-year-old swamp suddenly became narrower when they reached the celestial pond. If they wanted to go there, they had to go through the celestial pond. Yun Chujo took out a stone and threw it at the celestial pond. With a splash, the stone fell into the celestial pond. Other than stirring up a splash, there was no other movement. Everyone looked at each other. Where were the mermaids? Yun Chujo threw a few more stones into the pond, but there was still no reaction. Then the question was, should they go over? Yun Chujo looked at Silly and the others. Do you guys want to go in and take a bath? And then think about beast life inside? Silly and the others immediately retreated. What a joke. They had not lived long enough. Even if they were not smart enough, they knew that the celestial pond must have set up a trap and was waiting for them to fall into it. Yun Chujo was only trying to scare Silly and the others. She did not really intend to let them pass. She curled the corners of her lips and smiled in the direction of the celestial pond. We just want to make a path for us. If you let us pass, we will definitely reward you handsomely. The surface of the water was calm and there was no reaction. Yun Chujo said a lot of polite words, but there was still no reaction. Yun Chujo snorted coldly, "Is it interesting to hide a cat? If you still don't come out, I can only poison this pond." However, there was still no movement. "Oh. It seems that you are not afraid of poison. Then I will turn this pond into a spicy hot pot." Yun Chujo took out a sack of spicy noodles and threw it at the celestial pond. "Damn it, the spicy hot pot won't kill you." The sack was about to fall into the celestial pond, but it was knocked off course by a fish tail and landed on the hard ground opposite. However, after the sack landed on the ground, the spicy noodles still flew out, and some landed on the water surface of the celestial pond. The celestial pond suddenly splashed, and at the same time, a song was heard. Everyone's and the demon beast's eyes immediately became blurred. Yun Chujo was already prepared. She immediately took out a piece of jade glass Bodhi leaf and started to play. The sound of the jade glass Bodhi leaf was like a stream of clear water, immediately waking everyone and the demon beasts up. They all stared at the celestial pond with their eyes wide open. There were 5 mermaids floating in the celestial pond. However, at this moment, everyone no longer thought that they were mermaids. Although their lower body was a fish tail, their upper body was not human at all. Instead, it was similar to the upper body of a pig. However, due to the long hair on their backs, they looked very similar to mermaids from afar. The 5 mermaids stared at Yun Chujo with eyes full of hatred and stopped singing. Yun Chujo put away the jade glass Bodhi leaf and chuckled, "Why? Do you hate me? TSK TSK, I just enjoy the look of you who can't get rid of me even though you don't like me. You even learn to sing like mermaids with your ugly looks? You guys are really shameless. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much." The 5 mermaids were obviously very angry. They kept hitting the water with their tails. Yun Chujo knew that they were summoning their leader. She wanted to see what it was. Chapter 51-34 I am undone. At this moment, the water splashed and something came out of the celestial pond. However, everyone was stunned when they saw what came out. What the hell was this? The thing that came out of the water looked like a huge bear. The fur on its body was very long. Although it had 4 legs, it did not have claws. It looked very strange. What was even more surprising was that its 2 bell-sized eyes had no eyeballs and its ears were drooping. At this moment, Zhuang Ruhai suddenly cried out in a low voice, "Hundun. This is the ancient ferocious beast Hundun. There are records in ancient books that it looks like a bear. It has long fur covering its body and 4 legs without claws. It cannot see and cannot hear. This is simply the same." When everyone heard this, their faces revealed a look of horror. Heavens, it was one of the 4 great ancient ferocious beasts. This was 10,000 times more terrifying than the 9 neonate that they had heard of previously. They would not be able to survive. Yun Chujo narrowed her eyes. Hundun. She used her spiritual sense to ask Buttface, who was in the spirit beast bag, "Is that thing in front Hundun? It should be that idiot, but its strength doesn't seem to be much." "Little fairy, you don't have to be afraid of it at all," Buttface said disdainfully. Yun Chujo rolled her eyes when she heard Buttface's words. What is Hundun's weakness? Buttface immediately laughed sinisterly. Hundun is the most brainless fellow. Moreover, its temper is that people tend to resist virtue, while people tend to rely on vicious virtue. Yun Chujo glared at it. Speak human language. Aya, Just like me, it doesn't like good people. It likes evil people like you, little fairy. But Face said eagerly. To put it bluntly, it's just cheap. Yun Chujo said with a smile. But Face, there was no way to have a friendly chat. At this moment, Hun Dun opened his mouth to speak. His hoarse voice was like a saw cutting through wood. I am Hun Dun. Please leave quickly, or you will die. After Hun Dun finished speaking, a huge pressure spread out. Everyone was frightened by the pressure it emitted. Those swamp demon beasts were so scared that they even sneaked into the swamp, afraid that they would lose their lives. At this moment, Yun Chujo laughed lightly. Are you really Hun Dun? Why do I look like a fake? Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Everyone thought that this Yun Chujo was too bold. This was definitely Hun Dun. It had already admitted it, how could it be fake? Moreover, this huge pressure was not something that ordinary demonic beasts could have. Hun Dun, who was in the pond, snorted angrily. Of course I am Hun Dun, the little human actually suspects me, he is really courting death. Didn't you say that Hun Dun is not only blind but also deaf? Then why can you see us and hear us? You are definitely an imposter. Hun Dun snorted in disdain. Although I can't see or hear, I have a lot of supernatural powers, so I can naturally do it. So that's how it is. So you are really Hun Dun. But why did Xiong Qi and Tao Wu say that Hun Dun was already dead? Bullshit. They are bullshit. I am alive and well, they are the ones who are dead. You are courting death. Hun Dun cursed. Yun Chujo pouted. Why aren't you being arrogant? A fierce beast actually wants to pretend to be a cultural beast. Shameless. Don't think that you can fool them with your little show. If you really have the ability, you wouldn't be cooped up here. I have heard that among the 4 great fierce beasts, you are the most stupid. You don't have a brain at all. You actually want to threaten me? Chapter 5135 Combs. Hun Dun was obviously very angry. The long hair on his body stood up. Smelly girl, you're courting death. Yes, I'm here to seek death. Come and kill me. Yun Chujo said indifferently. Everyone thought that Yun Chujo was most likely crazy. This was the ancient fierce beast Hun Dun. What else could she be if she wasn't courting death by provoking him? However, that Hun Dun didn't do anything. Instead, it changed its face and said, Little girl, I find you very interesting. How about this, I'll let you go over, but everyone else must stay behind to be my food. What do you think? When everyone heard this, they were both dumbfounded and terrified. What they were dumbfounded about was naturally that there was something wrong with this Hun Dun's head, right? Yun Chujo scolded it so much, yet it actually thought that she was interesting. What was frightening was that if Yun Chujo agreed to Hun Dun's words, wouldn't they die here? Right at this moment, Yun Chujo laughed lightly and said, All right. If one doesn't do it for oneself, the heavens will punish the earth. As long as I can live, it's fine. Whether others die or not has nothing to do with me. Hun Dun immediately laughed out loud, his hoarse voice was exceptionally terrifying. Good. Very good. I like your personality. If that's the case, you can go. Don't worry, I will not sneak attack you. Yun Chujo waved her hands behind her back and jumped into the celestial pond. The crowd did not know what she meant, so they did not move and just stared at her. When Hun Dun saw Yun Chujo jump into the celestial pond, a faint light flashed in his empty eyes. All the long hair on his body suddenly wrapped around Yun Chujo. Yun Chujo did not resist. She allowed Hun Dun to use the long hair to drag her into the water. The surface of the water instantly regained its calm. Even the 5 mermaids had disappeared without a trace. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Everyone was in chaos. What should they do? Elder Tua thought of the gesture that Yun Chujo had made earlier and said to everyone, Little Jiu has always been smart. Since she did this, she must have her own thoughts. We can just wait here. At this moment, everyone had no backbone. After hearing what Elder Tuo said, they could only wait on the spot. They couldn't do anything even if they didn't wait on the spot. Because Yun Chujo wasn't here, those swamp beasts wouldn't listen to them at all. On the other side, Yun Chujo was dragged into the water. A white light flashed, and when she regained her sight, she was already in a cave. Yun Chujo curled her lips. Han Dun was a little miserable too. For example, the white tiger had an underground palace. However, this guy only had a broken cave. However, Tao Wu and Xiong Qi were also miserable. They became other people's soul beasts. Yun Chujo came back to her senses and touched Han Dun's long hair. It was smooth and felt good. You pervert. You actually took advantage of me. You're really courting death. Han Dun shouted in exasperation. Yun Chujo was speechless. Where did this guy get the courage to say such words? Take advantage of him? She was not blind to fall for a long-haired monster. While Yun Chujo was cursing in her heart, she was already dragged into the depths of the cave by Han Dun. The 5 mermaids followed closely behind. There were many demon beast bones in the cave. However, Yun Chujia's gaze suddenly shrunk. Those were combs. There were many combs that were polished with beast bones on the ground. Although the workmanship was very rough, the number was definitely considerable. With a rough look, there were probably 400 to 500 combs. Yun Chujo thought to herself, were these combs used by the mermaids, or Han Dun? Chapter 5136 Braiding Hair. Just as Yun Chujo was sizing up the combs, Han Dun released Yun Chujo and said arrogantly, originally, I wanted to eat you, but I saw that you were very envious of my long hair, so I decided to let you live. You stay and comb my long hair. Yun Chujo, she had never dreamed of such a scene. Was this Han Dun an ancient fierce beast? He must be an idiot. Yun Chujo blinked her eyes and said, all right, then I'll stay. Why don't I comb you now? Han Dun's big head nodded, very good, you little weakling know your place. Yun Chujo did not show it on the surface, but she gritted her teeth in her heart. Very good, I'll deal with you later. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Yun Chujo picked up a big comb from the ground and began to comb Han Dun's long hair. It was estimated that this fellow combed it many times every day, so the long hair was very smooth. It did not take much effort to comb it. Han Dun let out a comfortable snort and said, you little weakling are much more agile than those 5 idiots. They often break my long hair. As Han Dun said, he pointed to a corner of the cave with one leg and said, see? That is the tomb where I broke my hair. Those 5 idiots have to kowtow to my long hair every day. Yun Chujo looked in the direction that Han Dun was pointing at. As expected, there were a few stones piled up in a corner. She could vaguely see some hair behind the stones. Yun Chujia's heart was like a beeping dog. This Han Dun was simply a psychopath. However, there was one thing that she could see. This Han Dun was extremely concerned about its long hair. Since that was the case, she would let it learn a lesson. Han Dun cursed a few more times. The 5 mermaids were lying on the ground silently. It was obvious that they were used to being scolded. Yun Chujo rolled her eyes. Han Dun, not only do I know how to comb my hair, I also know how to braid it. I know all kinds of braids. Why don't I try to braid it for you? Han Dun said in surprise, really? I have never braided it before. Then, try to braid it for me. If you do it well, I will reward you heavily. Yun Chujo nodded and immediately began braiding little braids for Han Dun. Of course, this guy was not that kind. Braiding little braids? What a joke. This guy had tied Han Dun's long hair into countless knots. He looked like a poodle with curly hair. Han Dun was not aware of it at all. He was waiting for a wonderful show in a while. When the 5 mermaids saw it, they anxiously cried out. Hun Dun shouted impatiently, "All of you shut the fuck up. I know that you are all jealous of this little weakling being pampered, but who asked her to be smarter than you? If you continue to quarrel, I will eat you." The 5 mermaids looked at each other and did not say anything. They just tacitly retreated far away because they knew that the fiend would definitely fly into a rage in a while. After a while, Yun Chujo clapped her hands. "All right, it's done. You can take a look now." Hun Dun stood up happily and took out a huge crystal mirror from somewhere. He looked at himself in the mirror with longing. Then, he was dumbfounded. Hun Dun looked at himself in the mirror in disbelief. His smooth long hair was tied into ugly knots. Many of them were knots in the middle. Was that ugly thing in the mirror himself? Chapter 5137. Was she really that outstanding? Hun Dun raised a front claw, and the thing in the mirror also raised its front claw. Hun Dun shook his head again, and the thing in the mirror also shook its head. "Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much." "Ah! Ah! Ah!" Hun Dun let out a shrill scream. If people did not know, they would have thought that he was suffering some inhuman abuse. "Stupid girl. Little weakling. Ugly freak. I'm going to kill you. Give me back my long hair. Give me back my long hair." Hun Dun roared like he had gone mad. He stretched out his long hair and tried to entangle Yun Chujo. Unfortunately, his long hair was tied into a knot by Yun Chujo. He did not do anything to Yun Chujo, but he tripped Hun Dun himself. Hun Dun was going crazy with anger. "Little weakling, if it wasn't for my soul power being used to create a physical form, I would have smashed you into meat paste." Yun Chujo watched from the side and thought to herself, what Butt Face said was right. This Hun Dun's brain was indeed not that good. Otherwise, why would he reveal his trump card? Hun Dun roared for a long while before saying, "Forget it, I won't stoop to your level. Untie my long hair knot and I will not only let you leave, but those people can also leave with you." Yun Chujo laughed. "Hun Dun, do you think you have the right to negotiate with me? You only have one choice now, and that is to acknowledge me as your master, or I will kill you." Hun Dun was so angry that he wanted to pounce on Yun Chujo, but he fell down again. He roared angrily, "You want to kill me? What a joke, I am an ancient beast. Although I don't have much strength left, you little weakling actually dare to say such harsh words to me? You are tired of living." Yun Chujo looked at Hun Dun and shook her head. She thought to herself, how did such an idiot become an ancient ferocious beast? Butt Face, who was in the spirit beast bag, said eagerly, "Little fairy, you don't know. Although this Hun Dun is very stupid, its life is hard. It has the aura of Hun Dun in its body, so its body has a very strong recovery ability. Even if it is seriously injured, it will recover very quickly." Yun Chujo nodded. So that was the case. She had said it before, otherwise, such an idiot would die 8 times a day. "Hun Dun, since you acknowledge me as your master, I will help you untie all the knots on your long hair. Otherwise, your soft and long hair will only become a memory." Yun Chujo said. "Don't even think about it. I will not give in. I still have them. They will help me untie all these knots." Hun Dun pointed at the 5 mermaids, and said. Yun Chujo looked at the 5 mermaids' short and fat claws and said with a smile, "Are you sure they can untie them?" Hun Dun thought of the stupid looks of the 5 mermaids, and immediately felt uncertain. Yun Chujo took out Butt Face and said, "Butt Face, tell it." Hun Dun was stunned at first, then he looked at Butt Face carefully and laughed out loud, "I'm dying of laughter. I can't take it anymore, I'm dying of laughter. You actually turned into this ghastly appearance? And you're still called Butt Face? Ha, how embarrassing." Butt Face was not angry. He waited until Hun Dun had laughed enough before he said, I know you're jealous that I have a good name like Buttface. I won't argue with you. For the sake of old acquaintances, let me give you a piece of advice. The little fairy is the worst, most perverted, and most shameless person I've ever met. If you miss such a master, you'll regret it. Hun Dun asked suspiciously, is she really that outstanding? Yun Chujio, was it because she was inexperienced, or were these two idiots crazy? Chapter 5138, The Past of Hun Dun. Dog 2 nodded with certainty. Of course. The little fairy is full of bad ideas. Didn't you see it just now? If she was a good person, would she have thought of such a bad idea? Hun Dun nodded. What you said makes sense. She is indeed very bad and excellent. Dog 2 said proudly, of course. A little fairy with a name like Dog 2 is naturally not an ordinary person. Oh right, you weren't so perverted before. Why do you care so much about your long hair now? Hun Dun gnashed his teeth and said, don't mention it. 10,000 years ago, I was free and unfettered. I simply ran amok. However, I once offended a smelly girl, and then I was out of luck. That smelly girl didn't kill me, but shamelessly shaved off all my long hair. Brother Cheong Chi, you don't know. Without long hair, what's the difference between this and a human sprinting? Moreover, most of my abilities were on long hair. Without long hair, I lived a miserable life. From then on, I swore that I would treat my long hair well. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Furthermore, don't you think that my long hair is very beautiful? It makes my face look like a crown of jade, handsome and elegant. Hearing Hun Dun's words, Buttface was so disgusted that he almost vomited. Alright, stop talking. Are you trying to disgust me to death? Oh right, who is that stinky girl you mentioned? How could she harm you to such an extent? For some reason, when Yun Chujio heard Buttface's words, she felt a little guilty. This fellow consoled himself that it was probably not her doing. After all, if it was her doing, Hun Dun would have recognized her long ago. Hun Dun said unhappily, that damn stinky girl was wearing a mask at that time, so I didn't see her face at all. Yun Chujio heaved a sigh of relief inexplicably. However, when she heard Hun Dun's next sentence, her heart was in her throat again. That damned brat originally wanted to draw a few little bastards on me. Fortunately, many monks caught up with her and said that she stole some bell or some wooden fish. When she realized her conscience, she released me, Hun Dun said while gnashing his teeth. Buttface's dog eyes instantly widened and he looked at Yun Chujio who was beside him. Yun Chujio staggered and then glared at Buttface fiercely. Buttface used his divine sense to flatter her, little fairy, don't worry. I won't betray you. Besides, this Hun Dun's brain isn't working well. He won't notice it for a while. Yun Chujio finally felt relieved. She thought to herself that she had been a devil in her previous life. She was so miserable in this life. Was it because she had done too many wicked things in her previous life that she was punished? Hei Shinjo calmed herself down and said to Buttface, hurry up and convince him to establish a contract with me. Otherwise, more bad things will happen. Buttface immediately said to Hun Dun, Brother Hun Dun, let's not talk about those sad things. You can't always hold it in here, can you? Why don't you acknowledge the little fairy as your master? At least you can untie the knot on your long hair. Hun Dun snorted coldly. Although she is indeed excellent, I'm used to freedom and don't want to be restrained by others. Although the little fairy is bad, she is still very good to her spiritual pets. She won't be too restrained to you, Buttface advised. You don't have to say it. On account of your face, I can let you leave. As for the matter of recognizing your master, forget it, Hun Dun said with certainty. Chapter 5139 Beauty in the prime of time. Buttface tried to persuade him for a while, but his mouth was dry. Hun Dun did not agree. Just as Buttface was about to fly into a rage, Yun Chujo said faintly, "Hun Dun, if you don't acknowledge me as your master, you won't be able to leave this place. If that's the case, won't your beauty in the prime of time be buried? Don't you want to show the world what true beauty is?" Hearing this, Hun Dun trembled in excitement. "Do you really think I'm beautiful? Sorry for the inconvenience." "Thank you very much." Yun Chujo nodded with certainty. "You're really beautiful. You can conquer the world with your beauty." But Face staggered and almost fell to the ground. "Beauty? Little fairy, is it really good for you to lie like this?" Hun Dun believed it. He immediately shook his long hair and said excitedly, "Cheong Chi is right. You little girl are indeed very outstanding. What you said makes sense. I can't hide my beauty. I've decided to acknowledge you as my master. However, we have to sign an equal contract." Yun Chujo nodded and immediately signed an equal contract with Hun Dun. But Face lit a huge candle for Hun Dun in his heart. This brainless fellow would soon know what it meant to regret what he had done. After signing the contract, Yun Chujo revealed a mysterious smile. However, this smile was inexplicably cold in Hun Dun's eyes. It must be because of the knot in its long hair that it felt a little cold. "Hun Dun, these 5 are Gen, right? Where did you get them?" Yun Chujo asked. Hun Dun said casually, "You little girl, you are really knowledgeable." "Not bad, these 5 are indeed Gen, they are just 5 weak chickens. If not for the fact that they also have long hair, I would have eaten them long ago. Why would I still keep them until now?" Yun Chujo said with some suspicion, "They are not too weak, right? Didn't their singing sound before confuse those demon beasts and people?" Hun Dun pursed his lips. "Although they can sing to confuse people, their power isn't that great. It's because I cooperated with them that they can perform like this. Actually, I didn't catch them to let them help me hunt, but to let them comb my long hair. Although they are stupid, it's still better than nothing." "You said that you were the one who sang those songs." Yun Chujo found it hard to imagine that the thing in front of her could sing like that. Hun Dun snorted coldly. "Not only am I as beautiful as a flower, but am also good at singing and dancing." "What is this little singing?" Yun Chujo was a little confused. How could this thing be good at singing and dancing? At this moment, But Face said, "Little fairy, what it said is true. Apart from the long hair on its body, Hun Dun's other tricks are singing and dancing. Although he looks ugly, he can indeed sing and dance well. Moreover, his singing and dancing contain killing intent, making it impossible to guard against him." Hearing Dog 2's words, Yun Chujo finally believed it a little. Then, she asked, "Since you are so powerful, why did I break your singing?" Hun Dun said unhappily, "Firstly, my strength has dropped greatly. Secondly, that damn brat used some Buddha sound killer that was played by the jade glass Bodhi leaf to break my singing. Therefore, when I hear the voice of the jade Bodhi leaf, I tremble and can't perform at all. Fuck, if I find that damned girl, or the reincarnation of that damned girl, I will definitely shave her bald head and draw a little bastard on her head, so that she will never be able to marry." Chapter 51 Glory World's beauty was gone just as Hun Dun was speaking. He heard Yun Chujo say sinisterly, "Do you want to die?" When Hun Dun heard that, he said snappily, "You're the one who wants to die. Little girl, I'm warning you. Although we have established a contract, I'm not here to be bullied. You better be careful." But Face silently retreated a distance and lit a row of huge candles for Hun Dun in his heart. This idiot was courting death with his strength. At this moment, Yun Chujo sneered, "The person who warned me will only have 2 outcomes. Do you know what they are?" "What are they?" Hun Dun shook his long hair that was covered in knots and asked indifferently. "One is dead, and the other is living a life worse than death. Which do you choose?" Yun Chujo took out a large kitchen knife and said coldly. Hun Dun laughed out loud, "I'm dying of laughter. You little weakling, you still dare to threaten me? Do you think that I'm afraid of you because I've established a contract with you? Whatever methods you have, just use them. No matter how much you slice me, I won't let out a snort. Yun Chujo revealed an extremely brilliant smile. I won't slice you into 1,000 pieces. I want you to experience the feeling of running for your life. Han Dun was stunned at first, then he curled his lips and said, You want to learn from that smelly girl? TSK, don't you think about your own weight? If you dare to touch even a single hair of mine, I will kill you. Before Han Dun finished his words, he felt a sharp pain from his spiritual sense. He stared at Yun Chujo in disbelief. Impossible. We signed an equal contract, and my spiritual sense is much bigger than yours. How can you suppress me with your spiritual sense? Yun Chujo ignored him. She held the kitchen knife and scratched Han Dun's head. Han Dun's long hair instantly fell to the ground. Han Dun screamed miserably, I'll fight you to the death. Unfortunately, its spiritual sense was suppressed by Yun Chujo. It could not resist at all. Before it could get up, it fell to the ground. Soon, Han Dun's head became bald. Hei Shinjo put away the kitchen knife and sneered. She picked up a brush and drew a lifelike bastard on Han Dun's head. After Yun Chujo finished drawing, she said, But Face, what do you think of my drawing? But Face gloated, Little fairy, your drawing is too realistic. You are indeed my idol. Not only are you devastatingly beautiful, but you are also versatile. But Face's words were quickly interrupted by Han Dun's scream. Han Dun looked at the bald girl in the crystal mirror and felt his heart was about to break. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. His long hair. His magnificent beauty. All of it had turned into bubbles. Especially that little bastard on top of his head, who was actually grinning. It was simply a great humiliation. Han Dun bared his teeth and pounced on Yun Chujo. If he did not kill her today, he would not be called Han Dun. However, before he could even get close to Yun Chujo, he fell to the ground due to the intense pain of his divine sense. Han Dun tried a few times, but the result was the same. It lay on the ground and wailed, I don't want to live anymore. I don't have the face to see people anymore. I'm disfigured. I don't have my beauty anymore. Yun Chujo said faintly, If you continue to howl, you won't just be bald lady anymore. Do you want to try the feeling of running for your life again? Han Dun's howl came to an abrupt end. If it was before, it might not believe that Yun Chujo would do such a terrible thing. But now, it believed. Chapter 51-41 The leaving and staying of the 5 gens. Seeing that Han Dun was no longer howling, Yun Chujo said, Han Dun, what are you going to do with these 5 gen? Han Dun said in a stuttering voice, Buy 1, get 5 free. It's up to you whether you want them or not. Yun Chujo knew that Han Dun kept these 5 gen mostly for grooming it. However, she did not care about raising 5 more gen. Although Han Dun said that their abilities were not that great, it did not matter if she kept them. She did not expect the 5 dugongs to show a pleading expression like humans. Yun Chujo did not understand what they meant, but Han Dun did. It shouted impatiently, Get lost. Get lost. Anyway, you are all clumsy, I don't care about you. When the time comes, I will find a few human girls to serve me and shave them all into bald heads. Yun Chujo's eyes flashed and then asked, What happened to them? Han Dun said unhappily, They don't want to leave the 10,000-year-old swamp. Since they have served me for so many years, I will let them go. Yun Chujo did not care about this. Her target was Han Dun. As for the 5 gen, they did not have any ability, so she did not want them. Following that, the 5 gen quickly ran away. They were probably afraid that Han Dun would go back on his word. Yun Chujo saw that there was nothing else and said to Han Dun, Let's go up. Wait a moment, I want to take these fallen hair away with me. As Han Dun spoke, he began to tidy up the fallen hair on the ground. As he tidied it up, he cried. He cried so hard that it was as if he was crying when he heard it. Yun Chujo rolled her eyes speechlessly and urged him, hurry up, or else you'll have to run. Hearing that, Han Dun quickly sped up and kept all the fallen hair. After exiting the cave, Yun Chujo kept Han Dun into her spirit beast bag and then floated to the surface of the water. She did not want everyone to know that she had subdued Han Dun. At least, she did not want to make it public for the time being. Everyone was burning with anxiety at this moment. When they saw Yun Chujo come out, they could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Yun Chujo said to everyone and the swamp demon beasts that Han Dun has disappeared for some unknown reason. Let's hurry and leave this place at this time. Everyone's expression was a little complicated. Old Tua and the others wanted to say something but hesitated. However, they still followed Yun Chujo's instructions and quickly crossed the celestial pond. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. After they had left the celestial pond for some distance, Old Tua found an opportunity to say to Yun Chujo, previously, there was an ancient and complicated pattern above the celestial pond. It looked like a contract. Could it be that you have subdued Han Dun? Yun Chujo's heart tightened. Oh no, she had actually forgotten about this matter. Han Dun was an ancient ferocious beast. Naturally, there would be a huge commotion when it recognized its master. What should they do? However, this fellow thought about it. No one had seen it anyway. Even if she did not admit it, others could only guess and could not prove it. Therefore, this fellow said calmly, I wanted to subdue it, but after we reached the bottom of the water, it suddenly disappeared just as it was about to eat me. Old General Tua was skeptical, but he did not continue to ask. The most important thing now was to leave this 10,000-year-old swamp as soon as possible. Other things were secondary. Mukalu and the others were also very suspicious, but they did not dare to offend Yun Chujo, so they naturally did not ask. However, they originally wanted to kill Yun Chujo after leaving the 10,000-year-old swamp, but now they did not dare to make a move. What if that stinky girl really subdued Han Dun? Once they made a move, wouldn't they be courting death? Chapter 51-42, Blue Light. Although everyone had their own thoughts, they did not delay their journey. Whether it was the earth chi that was spreading continuously behind them or the 10,000-year-old swamp, everyone felt uneasy and wished they could leave this place immediately. Yun Chujo also felt uneasy. She recalled what Di Baiming had said before. He felt that there was danger in the depths of this 10,000-year-old swamp. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. That danger should not be referring to Han Dun. After all, this thing was nothing to her. So what kind of danger was it? Yun Chujo thought of this and used her divine sense to look at the spirit beast bag. Then, her face stiffened. She saw that inside the spirit beast bag, a few silly cubs were enthusiastically helping Han Dun untie the knot in his long hair. Yun Chujo could not help but feel puzzled. These silly cubs were not easy to deal with. How could they be so cooperative with Han Dun? But Face quickly answered her question, Little fairy, this fool Han Dun has a lot of good things and delicious food on him. He hired us to comb his hair as a reward. Yun Chujo, the corner of Yun Chujo's eyes twitched, and then she asked, Han Dun, is there anything scary in this 10,000-year-old swamp? Han Dun really didn't want to bother with Yun Chujo. He said unhappily, Scary? Nothing is more scary than you in front of me. Han Dun, do you really want to run away? Yun Chujo said coldly. Han Dun immediately cowered and changed his face. What I mean is, you are so outstanding that nothing can stop you. Yun Chujo was speechless. She had realized that this Han Dun was similar to Butt Face in some aspects. However, this Han Dun was more stupid. Stop talking nonsense and tell me honestly. Han Dun gritted his teeth in his heart. However, the beast had no choice but to lower his head under the eaves. He said, I'm afraid that the mud will dirty my long hair, so I basically won't leave the pool. I've only heard from the 5 Gen that blue light would occasionally flash about 500 li away from the pool. I don't know what exactly it is. However, I've never heard of any demon beast being injured by the blue light, so it shouldn't be a big deal. Yun Chujo narrowed her eyes. Blue light? Could it be that the danger the pretty boy felt was the blue light? Yun Chujo did not know why, but she thought of the blue glass. However, the gigolo and her both had red glass on them, so she was not afraid. Thinking of this, Yun Chujo heaved a sigh of relief. She found an opportunity to tell the silver snake what had happened. The silver snake said with uncertainty, I can't sense the specific danger either. I'm just a little flustered. Let's just be careful. As they traveled, Yun Chujo saw the blue light that Hun Dun mentioned. From afar, the area in front of them was covered by the blue light. It looked beautiful. Someone exclaimed, it's so beautiful. Could it be that there's a treasure in front of us that is emitting such a dazzling light? Yun Chujo felt that something was wrong with the little silver snake in her sleeve pocket. A cold air came from the sleeve pocket and made her shiver. She reached into the sleeve and felt a layer of ice on the small silver snake's body. Yun Chuji's heart sank. It seemed that her guess was right. The blue light could trigger the cold poison in the pretty boy's body. Now that there was such a big effect even though they were so far away, wouldn't the pretty boy die if they went any further? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.